morning to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. This is Business Morning, this Wednesday, the 28th of August. I am Bosin Amafayi. We welcome all of you to the program. Let's get going. A big story of Bloomberg saying Nigeria's debt could rise to nearly 36% of the country's GDP by the year 2024. And the country's interest payments on those debts could eat up to 74.6% of total revenue if Nigeria fails to carry out major revenue reforms. According to the Bloomberg report, Nigeria is spending more money servicing debts than on education, and the country facing a dilemma of rising population and slow GDP growth. Nigeria's tax collections is presently about 7% of the country's GDP, one of the lowest revenue to GDP ratios around the world. A day ago, on Monday, or 2 days ago, the Finance and Budget and National Planning Minister, Zainab Ahmed, says Nigeria's not in debt problem, but revenue problem, says the country is planning a tax revenue target of 85% over the next 4 years. That's part of the discussion we're having on the show this morning. We're looking at the business of Buhari's economy and the metrics that we need to fix very quickly as we move on. Meantime, a good news coming through from the oil sector, where Egypt has announced a major discovery of 1 trillion cubic feet of gas and another 60 million barrels of condensate in the oil-rich Niger Delta region. That's one good news in the wire as we wake up to today's business day. Meantime, the Central Bank of Nigeria has ordered banks to stop credit payments or bills for collection for milk imports, ramming in this FX restrictions policy that's focusing on local production of anything that the country can produce, in particular in the areas of agriculture. Meantime, the latest central bank's credit drive for banks to recover loans from defaulters by seizing the defaulters' assets in other banks has been receiving kudos. According to an investment note released early this morning by United Capital, an investment bank, the analyst, the investment bank says if the new policy is properly implemented, quote, we believe that this new measure would help stem the tide of defaults on bank loans by customers. United Capital went on to say that we opine that this new credit risk clause is positive for credit supply by banks' lenders amid weaker appetite for loan growth and should strengthen credit quality across the financial sector. What's the downside? The investment note says, however, this may slow demand for credit, especially from high-profile borrowers with bad credit history. That's all the stories making the headlines this Wednesday morning. Let's get going as far as some of these stories are concerned. Yes, that's UBA Chairman Tony Elumelu, who will be speaking today at the Tokyo International Conference for Africa. The Afri-capitalist proponent and the chairman of and founder of Tony Elumelu Foundation and Hess Holding will be speaking on 3 main areas on a panel that will have other top-profile speakers like the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. Tony Elumelu will be speaking on Africa's new oil, which he says the private sector should be the focus. And another point he will be speaking on has to do with Africa-led solutions to transformation, saying Africa should find its solutions to its problems at home, and why bilateral trade is important for the industrialization of the African continent. All of that, today's Japan's Tokyo International Conference is a very big conference which Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari is also attending. Let's check in with the stock market and the rest of the markets very quickly for you. We're now in the 3rd day of investors taking a bite of some profit on stocks. Very massive day. Let's check this in with Temple Ashaju from studios at the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Temple, good morning. Bring us up to speed here. Yesterday, volume in terms of turnover for stocks was below 200 million, yet profit-taking was massive, in particular with the oil and gas. This is shifting from the banks to the oil and gas, and this keeps just getting juggled from on a daily basis. What are you reading here, Temple?
Sure, Bosun. I mean, a lot of the oil and gas stocks are not doing well because, again, there hasn't really been any news around a lot of them. Total, for example, hasn't had anything new. Seplat, yes, we know they are involved in some kind of gas exploration in Imo State, so there hasn't been so much, support coming on the part of investors by way of appetite for that, because again, there hasn't been any development. The production targets timeline for that gas project of Seplat is in 2021. So, I mean, you can only just do some kind of speculative trading, bargain hunting on such a company for now. Forte Oil, you also know that the story around that is peculiar. So that's the reason why we're saying investors giving cold shoulder to these stocks in that region. That's what happened on Monday. That's what we saw sustained till yesterday as well. If you look at the industrial, the oil and gas sector was down 5.8% yesterday. All of that put together affected the markets. Let's run through it. So yesterday, basically, we lost 43.334 billion naira in the market. We got the negative sentiment driving the market. Now, as you said, activity level was down. We saw just 13 gainers and of course 23 losers in the market. The banking sector, we saw a lot of profit taking on that side of the market. Consumer goods side of the market was marginally up because of a PZ PLC, which was on bid yesterday, rising to 6 naira plus yesterday in the market. And of course, if you do the valuation for that particular company, we see that it's trading at a discount of some 58%. If you go by the year open price of 15 naira that it actually started the year with, but that impacted the market, that sector basically marginally. Industrial goods side of the market was also marginally affected by CCNN. Insurance experienced some decline, having seen some gains on Monday. But oil and gas, as we analyzed earlier, was really down by 5.8% yesterday. And if you go by what we see on the energy stocks now, things are not so good. Yes, Forte Oil, due to bargain hunting yesterday, experienced some 1.39% gains. A lot of the other sectors, companies that you have under the sector didn't really change. Seplat was down by about 10%. Total is now below 100 naira. Moving on to the unlisted securities market, you've got a market that gained yesterday by some 92 basis points. You got trading on just 4 securities yesterday. Volume of transaction was below 300,000. You got just 261,148 units of shares traded there for a value of 11.5 million naira. For the fixed income side of the market, you got investors now giving more attention to bonds and, of course, treasury bills. As yesterday, we saw yields declining by 7 basis points to 14.19%. Of course, the demand on February 2020, which represents the short end of the curve, is very significant. 2028 at the mid end of the curve. As you see there, 23rd of February 2028, experienced some kind of gain down because, again, yields were lower and, of course, prices went higher. For treasury bills, ditto was the game. We saw rates closing lower by 45 basis points. Bosun.
Yes, Tempo, thank you. It looks like a very big day on the debt market side, but we'll keep an eye on the stock market. Thank you so much, Tempo Ashaju, live to us from our studios at the Nigerian Stock Exchange.